men who have lost a sense of utility, have lost a sense of purpose. They're like, okay, well, who am I if I'm not the person who brings home the bread, puts food on the table, has a job?
I had never thought about that. Roy Wang, this has been a long time in the making, but I'm delighted to say welcome to the Greatest Comeback podcast.
Thank you for having me, Luke. Excited to be here.
It reminds me of that joke, how many men does it take to change a light bulb, like the toing and froing that we encountered in terms of trying to land upon this. Oh my God. I want to talk about how I encountered you, but before I do that, I want to ask you this question. You're at a dinner party in some fancy high-rise apartment in downtown Seattle with a bunch of people that some of them you know, some you don't. You're sitting next to a young lady and she turns around and says, "Roy, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I work as a coach. That's what I do for a living, and primarily with men, but I've also worked with women. I'd say one of my big focuses has been about bridging the gap of communication between men and women. That's something that I think I've witnessed so much division and confusion around. And I think when men and women can really get each other, not being so reactive to one another, but really get each other, that's when relationships flourish. And that's also when more of the world begins to flourish. And then I'll probably throw in like a little dash of, and I'm also super fascinated and interested in elevating people's, call it awareness or consciousness, deep connection to their spirit.
I love that. That's a beautiful response to a lovely young lady sitting next to you at an imaginary dinner party. I first encountered you on Instagram because I was going, and we kind of touched upon this when we were briefing a week or two back, but I was going through, maybe still am going through a transition. I really feel like, the flywheel of my hero's journey is really like it's spooled out, and I'm kind of stumbling and falling and kind of finding my way back to aspects of myself, aspects of my masculinity, aspects of my authentic self. And that was the mindset that I kind of had when I started to kind of screw around on Instagram, and the algorithm matched us up clearly. And I was drawn to you because as a man trying to understand his patterns of behavior and why he makes the decisions that he does, having never thought about that shit ever in his life before, your message was like dead center in the target for me. It was, I could really resonate to a lot of the themes and concepts that you are talking about in your content. And it occurred to me that he's getting this from somewhere. Like these are learnings that he's gathering from his clients, the men that he works with. And so it started to occur to me that as I was giving birth to this idea of a podcast around comebacks, which was really born of my own pain, really, it occurred to me, the more I understood of your message, I saw all these synergies. You were talking about the hero's journey. You were talking about the phoenix rising. And I'm thinking, shit, this is exactly the same path that I'm on. And there's this beautiful, I guess, interconnect between the work that you're doing with men and the concept of a comeback for me. Because if I think about my own experience as a person that's been evolving and changing shape through the decades, mostly because of pain, mostly because of the lessons that I have failed to learn have returned in kind, normally more acutely and normally more painfully, and that tends to give birth to a version of you that has a higher vibration, I guess. I describe it that way. But along that path, I've been looking for mentors and guides and people that have been able to express thoughts and ideas that resonated with what I felt I was going through. And that's certainly how I felt when I encountered you. Subsequent to all of that, man, I've also discovered, having listened to some other podcasts that you've been on, there's one thing that really grabbed my attention. And I don't know whether you want to talk about this, but you and I share a number of things in common, not least of which is we grew up in a single-parent household.
Mm.
And we grew up in a single-parent household where our grandmothers were super important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's only now that I'm starting to understand the relationship that I've formed with those women, and particularly my mother has gone on to be the template subconsciously for all of the choices I've made in terms of relationship and how I've behaved within a relationship. Because, and I'm going to stop talking here and ask you whether any of this resonates for you. But I think the thing that I was kind of wandering in the wilderness searching for the last couple of decades was this idea of masculinity. So without a template, without someone to say, here's how to be, here are the characteristics of what a good man should look like, and here's how to invoke them, here's how to build that muscle. I'm assuming you didn't have this either. I didn't have that, and as a consequence, I was looking at mostly other men, older men, not old enough to be my father, but certainly older men that I admired, mostly because of their sporting prowess or because of their prowess with women. And so I would start to construct a framework for how I thought I should be as a man based on this kind of quasi put together, skeletal framework that I kind of hobbled together over the years. Does any of that resonate for you?
100%. So the young, growing boy, if there is no male models around him. So as you mentioned, grew up in a single parent household, parents separated when I was 8. There wasn't a consistent elder male figure. So for the young boy, I imagine it was the case for you and so many other boys, is there's no conscious understanding of, I need some male role models to figure out this whole life thing and what it means to be a man and face the world as I'm growing.
It's so true.
It's more so, you're a kid, so you do what kids do. At some point, there's some subtle subconscious sense. Like, you can't put your finger on it, but there's some sense, something's not quite there. It'd be nice to have some guidance. And that's where, with a good teacher, if there's a male teacher in the schools or some sort of mentor, maybe it's a martial arts coach, there's kind of this natural inkling of, I kind of want to get closer, like for that young growing boy, I kind of get closer to this guy to learn some things. But nobody has really ever taught us this or spoken about it concretely of, hey, here's a journey in crossing the threshold from boyhood to manhood. Here are some topics like sex, relationships, money, failure, that would be worth talking about.
Yeah, big time.
We haven't really been given much of a concrete roadmap about it. So what else can a boy do besides kind of, like you said, cobble things together?
Yeah. And often, certainly left to your own devices, without a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of get some stuff wrong, particularly when it comes to relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you think the one thing that I was, as I've gotten more into your work, the question does come up for me in terms of how you see your role as a men's coach. How close does that come to being a relationship coach? Do you think? Because I would. In fact, let me take a step back. Of the men that come to you for help,
Mm-hmm.
as a proportion, what percentage of them are coming to you because of relationship pain?
Mm-hmm. I'd say 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which is the perfect setup for my next question, which is, how do you delineate between men's coach
Mm-hmm.
and relationship coach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I think with relationship coach, for the mass majority of people, if somebody hears, "Oh, I'm a relationship coach," they might kind of tie it to couples counseling or maybe a bit of marriage counseling.
Yeah.
So understanding how to navigate issues that come up within relationships, conflict, communication. With men's coach, kind of why I just picked up that title, because I was seeing other men use it. So I thought, okay, well, this would probably be the best way to distinguish myself as a beginning, because that's where a lot of my interest has been. But as many men will experience when they work with me, the precipitating factor for why they came was, hey, I just went through a terrible breakup. That's
Yeah.
probably one of the top ones for how men end up either in therapy or in coaching. Um, it starts to come out as both things around men's issues, masculinity, and then also here's how you can learn to better relate to women and feminine. Because for some men, that's something they don't know much about. Like, she's telling me she wants me to be more emotionally available. What does that even mean? I'm right here. I'm not like my dad who was gone and never around the house. I'm right here physically with her,
Mm.
but she's still saying she feels disconnected. So they, at a certain point, they just start to blend together. But I think
Yeah.
why men's coach can be a helpful term for men to see is, oh, well, there's probably some things I'm much more comfortable talking to a man about than I am with a woman. So when I first started therapy, which was one of the requirements in the master's program I was in, which was in counseling psychology, I decided to go with a man. I said, yeah, I didn't think through it too hard. Like, why do I want to work with men? It was just a felt sense of, I think I'd be more comfortable talking to a guy about this.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you think it's the, I got to choose my words carefully here. Do you think it's the loss or the disconnection from masculinity that is driving the relationship issue? Or do you think it's the inverse of that sometimes? Is it the relationship issue that is contributing to this sense of separation from masculinity?
Mm. Probably a little bit of both. So just using myself as an example, prior to any romantic relationships, there was none to base it off of. So really all I had to draw off of was my upbringing, which again, no one's really consciously thinking about as they're navigating through life with work, relationships, what have you. So for me, the structure of being raised by a single mom and then my grandma, I was very much attuned to the sensitivities, the needs, wants of women, as well as their frustrations. And have you read the book No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover?
It's in my bookshelf, but I haven't read it yet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something he talks about there is how, even in the field of education in schools, most teachers are women. So his perspective was, in the most early formative years of a boy's life, his understanding of the world, what is right, what is wrong, what is a good boy, what is a bad boy, is oriented around, what do women think about this, right? The teachers are evaluating, did you do a good
Yeah.
job? Are you misbehaving or are you behaving well? And then same with the mothers or grandmothers. So I was getting all my cues from the women in my life. And the other piece in here was, again, this wasn't ever conscious at the time. But when dad, left the picture, every child will take it personally. Like I did something, because why else would dad leave if I did something bad? Well, so if dad left, then I certainly don't want mom to leave either. Because if mom leaves, like, what's going to happen? How am I supposed to fend for myself? So there's all these unconscious beliefs that are then being built around, well, it's important to make sure other people are happy, that please them. And, well, who's still around? The women are around. So let me make damn sure that I give them no reason to leave. Which then led to the development of nice guy syndrome, a lot of the people-pleasing behaviors, which I would say is inherently lacking in masculine energy, because it's oriented around other people's preferences. I think masculinity has a little bit more of sometimes like a selfish stoicism to it. Like, yeah, this is the path that I want to walk towards. Some people might be upset, but I'm going to go that direction anyways.
Tell me, what was the language like that your mother used in relation to your father when he left?
Mostly negative. So, he's selfish, very selfish, really only cared about money, didn't care about you. That was kind of the dominating narrative that I heard. How he wasn't doing things that he was supposed to do, how he didn't care.
Yeah. So interesting. It's almost like every cue was like, yep, that's me, that's me, that's me. Yeah. It's same with me, as my and look, my mother's probably going to watch this, so none of this is not true, and all of which is said with compassion in my heart for her, because of course she was, same with your mum, right? They were just hurt, they were hurt, and there's probably a lot of other stuff going on too in terms of how society viewed them. They're managing their own emotions as well. But certainly they weren't. My mother certainly wasn't conscious of the language she used in relation to my dad. He was a bum. He was lazy. He couldn't hold down a job. And so, I mean, my parents split when I was a baby, so I didn't really have a relationship with him at all. So you're absolutely right. I was taking all of my cues in terms of existing in the world from my mother and my grandmother. But on top of that, the principal, certainly conceptually, the principal male in my life, my father, was no good. So, that leaves a mark when it comes to developing your own relationships,
right?
Intimate relationships with women. What did that look like for like the 20-year-old Roy Wang? Like in terms of when that part of your life became activated, and women were really in the wheelhouse of your existence, and in you responding to chemistry and biology. How did the template that you took from your mother and grandmother translate to intimate relationships when you first kind of butted up against them?
Yeah, there's kind of so interestingly, there's a opposite effect. So with my mom, oftentimes it was more combative. So the way in which she often communicated carried more of a critical manner. So compliments were backhanded, like, "Hey, that wasn't bad. Could be better though." Things like that, or how I could be doing better. So with my mom growing up, there was certainly a lot of tension as well. Wanted to make her happy, wanted to please her. None of it ever felt good enough. At times I would push back, lash out. But then in contrast with women, like you're saying, imagine 20-year-old Roy. with other women who weren't my mom, I was far more pleasant and really wanted to win their favor. So my way of doing it was just be very nice, very kind, very empathic, good listener, all of those things. And it really wasn't getting me the results that I wanted, which was to form a relationship. So there was kind of an interesting um, opposing effect where with mom, there's more tension, more combativeness, conflict. And then with women on the external, it's like, oh, how can I win their favor? How, and again, this was unconscious at the time. How can I finally be good enough? How do I make sure this woman in the external will not be like what happened here with mom, where it's never good enough?
Yeah. Yeah. And another point that just lands for me as well is, I think, when single mothers are playing that masculine and feminine role in a household too, I think that can kind of, and look, I'll never know what it's like to be a single mother, right? So what the hell do I know? But I've been the child of one. And I think, when you play both those roles, my sense is that sometimes particularly with sons, mothers can overcompensate. They kind of feel as though they have to play this quasi father role as well. And my experience as a kid was, oh wow, you've really over-rotated on the discipline and the achievement, and what that turned into was love was conditional, or it certainly appeared to be conditional based on what I was able to do or achieve at school or university, or at a job, right? And I think that's something that, in terms of the dynamic of our relationship, that's still a work in progress. We're still trying to figure out what is now that I have claimed the part of me that I think was missing. What does our relationship look like now? Now that I've got some agency.
Yeah.
Now that I've claimed my power, how do we line up now? Because the nature of this relationship needs to be completely different. How has your relationship with your mother evolved over the last couple of decades, particularly given the nature of what you do now?
It's much improved from where it was. So when I was in my master's program, we were required, as I mentioned, to have our own outside counseling, because the idea is you got to know what it's like to sit in that seat, right? If you want any authority to counsel somebody else, you need to know what it's like to be the client, to be the patient. So early on, when I was going through therapy, I was tapping into more of my anger, frustration, at the realization finally, but from a conscious level, of wow, so this was what was going on. This is what's been going on in this relationship with my mom. So there was kind of another teenage rebellious phase there of, mom, you don't understand, like you don't respect my boundaries, you this, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of butting of heads there. And I had it in my mind, as I think many people do, depending on which counseling program they go through. There can be a deep amount of resentment that's sometimes almost subtly encouraged, like, hey, you need to be upset about the things you never got from your parents. So that's where it was. And I had it in my mind of, well, my mom's just never going to get it. And, this relationship might not ever be good. Then sometime later, and I have a blog on my website, I think it was maybe 2022 or 2021 when I released it, which is titled Forgiving Your Parents. I started to realize the very things that I had been upset about what my mom was doing. Like, you expect me to behave this way. You want me to react this way. I was essentially doing the same thing in reverse, where I couldn't accept her where she was. as who she is. And I wanted her behavior to change because I've been learning all this fantastic counseling, therapeutic theory stuff. So clearly, I know what I'm talking about, and you should just listen to me.
Yeah.
And so when that realization sunk in, I was like, shoot, then I'm really just causing my own frustration now. Like, yeah, would it be nice if she started to interact and speak to me in a different way? Sure. But if I can't be okay with the fact that, she might be like this for forever, can I be okay with that? Or is it just complete deal breaker? And eventually my answer was, no, I can learn to be okay with this. She may never change, but I can still have authority over how I respond. So now, sometimes it almost seems like she criticizes less. And maybe that she has shifted. I think she has. But that happened because I started to change how I showed up, how I started to respond to her. So before, if she triggered me with some criticism or, you should do more of this. Why don't you do it the way that I would do it? Before where I would get into an argument, now I'd say, yeah, that just doesn't work for me. But hey, I appreciate your feedback. And if she pushes some more, I say, hey, I'm only going to say this once. I heard what you have to say. I get it. And this is just how I'm going to do it. And it's like I've stopped feeding the fire of conflict between us. And so at a certain point, she's like, okay, fine, whatever. Even if she keeps doing it, that's what I've decided, what I'm committed to. Like, I enjoy showing up this way better. And now we can have overall pleasant conversations. We can have holiday gatherings without me thinking, how am I going to survive this? That's no longer how I approach it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, so many things in that I'm unpacking as I'm speaking. But I had a similar conversation with my mum, and that kind of, it was a come to Jesus conversation whereby, the overall message was, I'd like you to start to think about what you say to me, because some of the things you say are hurtful and they hurt my feelings. And I think that generation, I think I'm a bit older than you, but certainly my mother's generation, I think there was this kind of, I'll say sovereignty over children. It's almost like there's more of a possessiveness, more of a, you're a resource for me and therefore subject to whatever I want to say to you in terms of, or give you in terms of advice or feedback. And I think maybe I think that's a generational thing. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But certainly in terms of my relationship with my mother, that only stopped when I was man enough to say, okay, that's, if we want to have a relationship that has any depth other than surface level, kisses on the cheek at Easter and Christmas, we've got to start to get honest with each other in terms of how we make each other feel, how we communicate. So like I said, that's, I think I've kind of made a breakthrough with that. And to be fair to her, I think she's taken a step forward as well. But it's a thing that's just going to take a lot of work. And I think I told you I was on retreat in Peru about a month ago. When you're kind of on this healing journey, and I kind of cringe when I say healing journey, but I know that you know what I'm talking about. Most people will know what I'm talking about. But I would consider that I'm on that. I'm proudly on that path, right? Completely committed to it. But falling off, getting back on, falling off, getting back on. And that's kind of where the idea for the podcast came, was this concept of this constant sense of coming back to something, losing my way, coming back. But there was a facilitator on retreat. I've always been, not always, but now that I'm on this journey, I've been almost obsessed with authenticity. This need to kind of just peel back the layers and get, as close to the real me as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always thought of authenticity as this sort of destination that I'll finally arrive at. Mark Manson's got this great line, and I don't want to fuck this up because it was so good. He was on his own podcast. He said, "Personal development is the continual process of lying to yourself less."
Mm.
And I just thought, yeah, that's that. And that landed for me. And so, but the insight that I got in retreat was that authenticity is a moment by moment thing. It's not a destination. It's not the thing that you're working towards. That you finally cross the line and you say, "I'm authentic, everybody." No. It's me showing up to this conversation as authentically as I can. It's me showing up to the next moment as authentically as I can. And that's kind of been, it's become somewhat of an obsession, and it certainly spawned this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that drew you to this sort of work?
I think it's the exhausted answer that most people share is the personal pain, right? Trying to make sense of the personal pain. Why do I keep not getting what I want? Why do I feel depressed? Why do I feel sad? Why am I constantly in the friend zone? Why can't I get over my parents' divorce? What happened there? There were all these unanswered questions and things that I had been thinking about. And so I think somebody shared a clip. It might have been a woman named Marie von Franz or some other woman, but she had spoken about depression as a great gift, because how else would you be, motivated to really stop everything and to look within? And so that was kind of the rite of passage. That was the invitation of here's some pain. Are you willing to take a look at what needs attention here? And as I started to embark on that journey, didn't necessarily have a clear destination in mind, but it was just like, I want to figure this out, because I certainly don't want to continue to feel like this. I started to get the answers that I had been looking for. Things started to make more sense of, why do I behave the way that I have behaved? Why have I constantly been friend zoned? Why couldn't I get over my parents' divorce? And
sorry, Roy, if I can just jump in there.
Yeah.
Are you putting these pieces together yourself, or is this the therapist helping you with this stuff? How are you making these breakthroughs? These or processing these insights whereby they actually start to make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Combination of both. So what started the journey was I graduated undergrad with I majored in biology. I had the intention to go into med school. After I graduated, that wasn't the case anymore. So I had spent a year abroad, actually, minoring in Japanese. Really great experience, but came back and was kind of lost. Like, it's not med school, so I'm not entirely sure what to do. And I spent about a year and a half pretty lost. And with the friend groups I was talking to, like, people could tell, but there also weren't any like specific answers. People just say, "Hey, I'm sorry you feel bad, but you probably got to do something." So I think a year and a half was when it was finally enough to like, okay, I need to do something. And how that was the fertile grounds for action was I just drew 2 circles. I drew 2 circles on a piece of paper. I'm like, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And the thing that popped up was, okay, I enjoy one-on-one interactions, and I like to help people. I enjoy one-on-one interactions where I get to help people. Counseling popped top of mind. Okay, so maybe I could do counseling. And I gave myself permission in that moment, which I had never done before, because I was always fixated on this needs to be the right decision. I can't screw this up. I said, if I go into a counseling program and I don't like it, I can always leave. That was like the first time I ever thought that way. Went into the counseling program, and that's where like pieces started to come together. Therapists, but also teachers were pointing out some things about the way I had been thinking. And that's where there was like a deconstruction of everything that I thought that I knew about the way the world worked, who I was in the world. And as those pieces fell apart, that's where I started to figure out how to put them back together in a way that was more useful and valuable towards the life that I did want to create for myself.
I love that. I want to read you something from your website. It's part of your bio. It says, "My mission is to support men in their journey of coming back into their power, a path that I have walked and continue to walk." When you say power, what do you mean by power? Can you be a bit more specific in relation to the range of what that might entail?
Yeah. I think the specific context that I was coming from with that statement is from the place of knowing what it's like to live life as the nice guy, the guy who people pleases, who's desperate for approval from other people. And that isn't a very empowering place to live from, because a man who does live in that way, his well-being, joy, satisfaction in life is always going to be dependent on some external factor, person, possessions, whatever it may be. And what I want for men who can relate to that journey, that experience of the nice guy syndrome, the people pleasing, not feeling like they're ever enough, is to recognize that they already have that potential within them. All that needs to happen is to remove the beliefs, the programs, the conditioning that have caused them to think it's not possible, and there always needs to be something more that they need to do to justify their own worth. And I think when a man recognizes that, the worthiness has always been here. I've just had to remove some of these blinders, some of these blocks. Then they truly come into their power or their authenticity. Like, I can now live life completely free and clear to be who I am, even as I'm discovering the wide expanse of all that I am. And so life becomes more fun, more explorative, adventurous, not this dangerous game where like I just need to navigate and not upset anyone, not screw anything up. It gets to be a lot more playful.
Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with Peter Crone? Have you heard that name?
Mm-mm.
You know that name? No, he's a coach. He's quite a remarkable coach. He uses an analogy that's very apropos of what you just described. He talks about people as being blocks of marble within which the statue of David is already contained. And that rather than we think we've got to acquire characteristics that we admire in other people and kind of build this thing from the outside, but the point of that analogy that he's creating there is to suggest and remind us all, and I think it speaks very nicely to what you've just said, is the fact that the statue of David is already within us. And I think the job that we've got is to kind of chip away at all the sort of extraneous marble until you find that version of you, right? So I think you're absolutely right. The game is not, in my mind, the game is not, when I think about coming back, it's not about necessarily getting over the breakup, although of course that's important. It's not necessarily about getting over the bankruptcy or the alcoholism or money being an issue in the household, or whatever that thing is that we feel compelled to kind of, that drives us to want to reset, our lives and say, right, I'm going to start again. I think the ultimate objective needs to be that rebuilding that inner relationship with, our divine selves, spirit. Because I think when you're in touch with your divine agency and sovereignty, I think you're absolutely right, Roy. There's nothing that can kind of push you off course, because I think when the waves do come, and they still will come, you've got a better system of dealing with those issues and challenges. And that's why the name of the podcast is The Greatest Comeback, because I think that's the greatest comeback anyone can ever make. You mentioned the word pain in relation to what brought you to this work. And I kind of internally, I went, yep. It reminded me of this beautiful moment that I had with, I was on, this is harking back to this ayahuasca retreat that I did in Peru a little while ago. We were on the boat on our way to the temple. You kind of fly into Iquitos, and a bus takes you to the Nanai River. It's not the Amazon. And you kind of jump in this sort of toothpick boat, and it takes you upriver for, 40 minutes, and you pile out. And that's really the first time you interact with the other people in the group. And there was a exotic, beautiful woman sitting next to me on my left-hand side. And, asking, why are you here, is a dangerous question, because as soon as I asked the question of her, I knew that wasn't necessarily an easy question to ask someone. And she just turned to me, and I found out later that she's a psychologist, Dr. Ahu Yara, an amazing lady, and someone that I've got so much time for and love in my heart. She looked at me and she said, pain. What brings me here is pain. And I think, I do wonder sometimes, Roy, is pain the necessary doorway that we have to walk through in order to get to that next evolutionary version of us?
Yeah, I think so.
That's the bad news.
Yeah.
I got some bad news for you. Yes, 100% necessary.
Yeah, it. There's, I don't know who first said it, but we probably have heard it quite often, is that pain is a harsh teacher. And I think it's also strangely compassionate. Pain can be a harsh teacher, but also strangely compassionate. And there's this quote from a man named A.H. Almas, I believe, in his book called The Diamond Approach. And there's a line in there where he mentions, like, this pain, the troubling matters in your life are specifically designed by a part of you that loves you more than anything else. And it does not want you to miss the opportunity and the gift to fully claim yourself, to own yourself. It doesn't want you to miss this opportunity. So it will do whatever it can to get your attention. Those painful nudges here, there. It might even destroy your life just so you will finally pay attention. And I think that it concluded with, ultimately, the most problematic things in your life are ultimately the most compassionate, or something like that. And it's when I read it, I was ready to read it. But at another time, years before, I probably would have hated it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do see pain as kind of a necessary gate to kind of cross through. I love the hero's journey, symbolism and mythology that Joseph Campbell speaks to. He calls them the threshold guardians. And there's the image I think he wrote of when you go see some of those shrines in China or Japan. They have those lions on both sides in front of the gate. And they're fierce looking lions. And the idea is, in order to cross the threshold to where you want to go, what you want to achieve, you must pay a price in order to cross. And kind of that price to pay is the surrendering of the self you thought you've been. People might say it also the ego. And it can be a very intense process to unravel. But it's also in the unraveling that, as you said, with the marble, the chips that weren't necessary, that no longer serve, they were adaptive, like they played a survival mechanism at a certain point in your life. Even for the people pleasers, I don't want to think you're dysfunctional. You're very functional for a specific time in your life until now that thing is really no longer functional. It's actually causing more of what you don't want. And so that's where the unraveling happens. This is no longer necessary. But as I'm sure you know intimately well, with ayahuasca journeys and any other psychedelic entheogens, it can be tough. It can be very just unraveling your guts. Yeah. And then there's on the other side of that surrender, there's a recognition of, okay, I've always been light.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's always struck me as being, once you appreciate the role that pain plays in helping you evolve, it starts to, well, certainly in my case, it starts to shape the way you perceive difficult circumstances. Mm-hmm. And, those life catastrophes that befall all of us. Because I think, certainly in my life, there's this temptation, instinct to run. When trouble comes, I'm just going to run or numb or distract, or I don't want to have to deal with that. The irony is, if we do deal with that and put out and sit in the fire and have that fire burn those parts of us out that we no longer need, that we still honor. That's one of the things that I've been big on recently is, honoring previous versions of me. Like, if there was a people pleaser version of me, and yes, there was, he wasn't a piece of shit. He was just the result of all the things that had happened to him up until that point, So I kind of celebrate all these versions, and I don't. I certainly don't. I used to disrespect, that version of me, and talk down to him. But I've realized, no. Those were parts of me that were simply trying to protect me, and there was a benevolent intent behind a lot of those adaptive behaviors. It wasn't, they weren't trying to make me look silly or foolish or make me fail. But I really think that pain and, like, the proverbial universal 4x2 to the back of the head, whilst it's so explosive, it's so necessary. It's so necessary. And I think you're right. I don't think that you can actually become more ascended versions of who you are without the 4x2. If for nothing else, then to have it be the giver of the lesson.
Is there a favorite movie, book, fantasy that just comes top of mind as like a story representing that trial where pain is the initiating force?
It's got to be Star Wars.
Star Wars.
It's got to be Star Wars. Yeah. Luke goes through the trials of being unseen. There's this sense within him that he's called to something greater. He goes through the trial of seeing his uncle and aunt die, the mentor Obi-Wan comes in and collects him and kind of shows him the way. And over the course of that's not a linear journey to become a Jedi. It's, he goes through trials and tribulations. And so I think, the hero's journey as a motif through cinema is incredible. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What about you? Does something come to mind for you?
Yeah, it's got to be Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yeah. So many beautiful, moving moments in that movie to take from. I think Frodo would be one. Like, have you seen the full trilogy?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a while where I think most of the time when people watch that film, I'm thinking mostly for men, people are like, oh yeah, Aragorn or Legolas or kind of Boromir. They love the guys who are like brave, courageous, charge into battle. And for a time, I actually thought Frodo was kind of lame. I was like, he's kind of like the weakest of the bunch. But my perspective shifted over the years, where as I was watching some of the interactions he had, like in the very beginning when Gandalf basically drops the bomb of, hey, so you're going to have to take this ring because I'm not taking it. So you're going to have to do something about it. Like he kind of bargained, but then there was like this resoluteness where in this scene, he just says to Gandalf, what must I do? It's like, here's a man, smallest of men, in stature, a hobbit, who in that moment fully accepts the fate that is before him. And then in his encounter with Galadriel, right, that like fountain, Galadriel's mirror, that's a beautiful interchange where he shares like, though I know what I must do, it's just that I'm afraid to do it. And she encourages him and says, even the smallest creature can change the course of the future. And it's just beautiful to see how those characters wrestle with doubt, that inner torment, but also the understanding that, like, well, if they don't face it, they kind of will perish as well, just more slowly.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I want to go back to power for a minute. Part of what you do for men is to help them return to a sense of power, and let's agree that power means lots of things. But at its core, it's perhaps a return to a sense of self and sovereignty and authorship over one's life. Why do you think men are losing their power? It feels like is it the zeitgeist? Is it? I wonder sometimes, is this something that is specific to the West? There's this. I feel like there is this shift in gender dynamics that's seeing men play it smaller than perhaps previous generations. Perhaps driven by. Partly driven by the woke movement, partly driven by the emergence of spiritualism, I think. But I kind of, and I think the number of men's coaches that are now offering services, I think, is perhaps a reflection of this diminishment that I see certainly in social media. But my sense is that this is a very Western specific occurrence, if in fact it's occurring. And I think the corollary of that is what I'm observing is that women seem to be growing in their masculine. They're taking more authority and ownership of careers, relationships, their bodies. I think things like OnlyFans, and I want to get your take on OnlyFans in a second, and pornography, but I think that's got potential to really fuck things up for men and women relationally.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel that there's this perfect storm, and sort of men are playing smaller, women are playing bigger. Men are trying to step up into their masculine, but women are solidly in their masculine already because they're paying the mortgage for themselves. Or what are your thoughts on what are you seeing in relation to relationship dynamics? Is that being reflected in the types of conversations you're having with your clients?
Yeah, they are. So there's a couple of things in there. You started mentioning with the question, how have men kind of lost touch with their power?
Yeah, sorry, I buried a few questions in there. Yeah,
we'll find our way through all of them. So I think there's many factors going on there. One can just be simple distractions. The times that we live in, there's so much you can do just in the palm of your hand. It's endless. So distraction certainly plays a part in pulling men out of a deep focus, a sense of intention, to all these other flashing lights, sounds, and noises. The other piece that many people have mentioned is, for a long time, men have hinged their identity and worth around utility. I'm the provider. I'm the breadwinner. I work with my hands only. There's some of these hardy utility functions that men have been used to. But as things have become more automated, and now in the age of AI growing super fast, who knows what else will become automated? And a lot of men, understandably, like there's the whole truckers, and I think even workers at the, I don't know what it's called, the ports, going on strikes of like, we refuse to, surrender our jobs, this or that, to AI. We deserve to be here. So understandably, men who have lost a sense of utility have lost a sense of purpose. They're like, okay, well, who am I if I'm not the person who brings home the bread, puts food on the table, has a job?
I had never thought about that.
Yeah. So I think that definitely plays a huge part. And then that's where the distractions play a great function to fill the void, that pain. Right? These are tough questions to think about. I'll reach for the bottle. These are tough questions to think about. I'll reach for OnlyFans or pornography websites, because it's a way to kind of emotionally cope with some very difficult questions and existential crises. Other factor is, you mentioned woke ideology shifts in kind of the gender ideology. I would say that was something that I experienced in terms of how the nice guy fits into all of this. And I recently made a post titled, Who's Behind the Proud Male Feminist? Because especially in the West, lots of men have expressed like, oh, I'm a proud feminist. Feminism is for men as well. And I'm sure there can be valid points in there. But it's almost as if a lot of men have energetically castrated themselves. It's like, I refuse to take any stance that could possibly be controversial and put me in the crosshairs of a group of women. Like there's a tremendous amount of power to women and their capacity to shame men. Just throw around the word patriarchy. You're a product of the patriarchy. You're a toxic man. You don't recognize your male privilege. At that time, when I was deep in it, it felt like an assault on the core of who I was. Oh gosh, I don't want to be a toxic male. I don't want to be a product of the patriarchy. I need to know what my male privilege is. And so there is a literal and energetic, tucking our tails to the inside of our legs, tucking our cocks to the inside of our legs. Like, I don't want to man spread. I don't want to just do anything that could upset anybody. And that definitely severs a man from his sense of agency, his voice.
Yeah, big time. Um, what about what are your thoughts on? Well, let me ask you this: how 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 pervasive, how big of an issue do you think pornography is for men
Mm.
at the moment?
Probably a pretty big issue. Certainly is something that I struggled with in a large part of my life. And now I think ever more so for young men with, again, OnlyFans didn't exist when I was growing up. Um,
Hmm.
I still had dial up, so there was no rapid way in which I could consume. If I wanted to, look at porn, I'd be sitting there for about 3 hours watching that little green bar load. I'm like, all right, I'm going to see it. I'm going to see some tonight. I just need to wait
Yeah,
3 hours. But now it's just like instantaneous.
yeah,
Um, it's it's playing a big part in, I think, disempowering men and kind of locking them, fixating them only into, I guess you just call it like their sexual center, or their in, I guess, is it Hindu philosophy, the second chakra. All the
yep.
energy is focused there, and I think people have said the first, second, third chakra are all about more like a survival instinct. So
Hmm.
if you're constantly in a survival fight or flight state of being, it's very hard to access any sense of creativity, higher mind, visions, and focus in building something that's meaningful, has purpose and value to you.
Hmm.
I think, I when I was still working as a therapist, I ran a small group for men struggling with porn addiction. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of young men today who have a hard time with that.
Yeah, I think it also, like, I kind of, I worry that we're going to end up as a species that kind of just, all the men are just at home jacking off, watching
Mm-hmm.
Netflix and going to bed, and there's no relationship,
Mm-hmm.
there's no
Mm-hmm.
intimacy with women anymore. There's no maybe we lose the ability to actually woo a woman,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
engage with them and speak to them.
Yeah.
I think it just seems like there's this tension now, where men are kind of addicted to pornography, and women, with the emergence of OnlyFans, that I mean, that's a distilled recognition of the
Mm-hmm.
market, right, for
Mm-hmm.
pornography. Because I think, to varying degrees, OnlyFans is simply a representation of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I do worry that with these two extremes going on, what is the, and of course, like, terms like ghosting didn't exist in my day, but with the
Mm-hmm.
emergence of the apps,
Yeah.
the fundamental dynamics of human relationship are starting to just be worn away. Um,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. There can be a very grim picture if we look at it this way, which is something I have seen as a possibility. It's absolutely a possible reality. Um, Not only is it that, for speaking about men first, pornography addiction, um, this is, again, bringing back AI and how there are now sex dolls, sex robots. People are trying to figure out how to integrate AI into sex robots to create it as
Mm,
real as possible. Uh, in the height of my addiction point, like, because I could not see myself approaching women, wooing a woman, like you said, right? I had bought sex dolls, sex toys, because I'm like, well, I want to feel pleasure somehow. I do want to actually love on something representing a woman, but because I'm so terrified about reaching out to an actual woman, fear of rejection, this or that, then this is the safest option. And
mm,
for some people, maybe that's their path for a while until they realize, no, I do want the real thing, which is what was the case for me.
yeah.
But with the integration of AI, it'll get into a very hairy area for a lot of men, because now there's no effort that's required.
Yeah.
There was really not much effort for me besides, okay, earning money. Okay, now I can purchase a cheap little sex doll and, act out more of the carnal pleasures. But in terms of the relational aspect, that'll become, for some men, it can become a lost skill.
Now she's telling me that she loves me, the robot. And all of
Yeah.
a sudden, seriously, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
man, I completely understand what you're saying. I'd never thought about that. Yeah. If you've got like a robot now whispering sweet nothings in your ear, then holy shit.
Those apps do exist already. Both men and women use them, where it's just, I don't remember the name, but there was an ad that popped up even just in my Instagram like a year ago. It was an AI conversation robot that if you enrolled each day, it would just be like, hey, how are you doing today? Tell me about something fun that you did. And for some people who have been deeply isolated, that's the closest form of intimacy that they're getting. And then for women, the grim reality that is possible is, I'm sure for some women, those sex robots with AI integration could also be something that would seem appealing. But I've also seen a lot of women use ChatGPT to do things like, analyze this text thread with this guy that I'm seeing. Should I break up with him? Should I stay with him? Are there any red flags? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Women have also have talked about using ChatGPT to make responses to guys that either they want to stop seeing or just help me clean up my message so I can send this to them. Using AI to chat and ask about various different questions. As some women say, like, they love to yap, and ChatGPT 24/7, you can yap all you want. So I think there is that, in my opinion, grim reality where both men and women turn AI into occupying some functionality of relationship, intimacy, and connection, with or without sexual facets as well. And the more that people do that, which is completely in their free will, one of the consequences is they'll have a really hard time relating to actual human beings.
Yeah. Connection.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And ironically, what they are looking for through that anyways is connection.
Is connection. Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. Scary, but interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think, in terms of loss of power, at its most extreme, what is, and I'm asking you, I guess, to reflect upon the nature of some of the stories that your clients come to you with.
Mm-hmm.
The problem statement when they press contact or they send you a message. At its most extreme, what does loss of power look like in men?
Tying back to the porn addiction, that's been one that men have reached out to me with, like, hey, I can't stop looking at porn. It's distracting me from work. I feel completely unmotivated. One guy who said he's engaged, and he says, I still haven't told my fiance. I will have several times in the day where I will just go disappear into the bathroom or something, flip open my phone, look at these Instagram models, quickly whack off, and try to reconnect with his fiance. And to me, when I heard that, that's a deeply troubling place to be. I understand why you're reaching out. And breakups being another one where I think a lot of men know how to try to problem solve in terms of, how do I create a business? How do I earn money? How do I optimize some of the more practical aspects of their life? The relational component, emotional intelligence, what have you, is something that's very foreign to me. Okay? I don't know how to get through to her. I don't know what exactly she wants. I'm having trouble setting my boundaries for the people pleaser. both men and
Mm.
women. That's
Mm.
a deep struggle. Like I don't know how to assert myself, and I always feel like I'm in the wrong. And am I in an emotionally abusive relationship? I think I am, but I don't know how to get out.
Mm. And how do you? I mean, I'm assuming it's lots of conversations between you and your client, but
Mm-hmm.
is there typically a starting place for you? You know, when someone says, "Roy, I'm showing up as this. These are my issues. This is what's the problem for me, as I understand it." Um, is there a process that you employ to kind of understand? Because I would imagine that on that issue of porn addiction,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm not assuming it is masking something
Mm-hmm.
beneath that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is is it a simple process to get to what's underneath, or is that can that be a difficult, more investigative
Mm-hmm.
process?
Yeah, it's I think it's different person to person. So I don't have a firm like some people do. I have a 12-step process I take people
Yeah.
through, and when they're done, they're in this shape. I have more of a general intention of where I see them going and various process we'll use to get them there. But just using the example of pornography, for some men, uh, they might want just an accountability partner. Like I just need somebody, like give me the password blockers and locks on my phone and stuff, and just constantly check in with me. I personally don't align with that philosophy of things, uh, because even when somebody says, "Oh yeah, I successfully haven't looked at porn for 2 weeks now," yeah, we can celebrate that victory, but there's kind of still a subconscious focus of your life's based around not looking at porn. So in a way,
Mm.
it's still in the picture somehow. I want you more interested in, yeah, I haven't looked at porn, haven't really thought about that, but hey, I'm way interested in this relationship that I've been in. Like we're connecting on such a deep level. I'm doing so much better at my job. I even asked for a raise and got it. Like there's something else that is more core to their identity and the values they want to live out besides just, I want to be a man who doesn't look at porn.
Mm.
So some of the ways that I have gotten men there and how I got there was looking at the areas of their life where there has been dissatisfaction or a sense of, I'm not making headway here. I don't feel effective or potent in this area of my life. So when I first started with my counselor, I did bring up the porn addiction. And to my surprise, we didn't focus on the porn addiction at all. There was never a single check-in. Have you looked at porn today? What are you doing to not look at porn? We were talking about the relationships in my life and the dissatisfaction that I felt, where I felt powerless.
Mm.
And through connecting more with him, I was also connecting more to myself and then to the world around me, the people around me. So I started to be more engaged in relationships and the external world from a different place of being, more clear, more authentic. And so it was almost like this very subtle realization of, yeah, we haven't really talked about porn much in our sessions. I also haven't really thought to look at it either.
Mm.
Kind of interesting because I've been more involved in what is interesting in life.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
if there's other deeper problems, that's where we can bring in some of the more little tricks to kind of work with the subconscious mind so that porn becomes something that's just completely uninteresting, or if needed to be more extreme, like cause porn to seem like incredibly gross, cause like a visceral sense of disgust. There's some of those
Yeah.
techniques as well.
Yeah. Like, when your mum would catch you smoking cigarettes and she'd make you smoke the whole packet, a bit like that. just to watch porn. The exercise is to watch it 24 hours straight. Maybe that's
that could be effective. I'd be curious to see somebody who says, "All right,
Yeah.
you need to live stream yourself watching porn for 24 hours." maybe after that, they're like, yeah, I don't ever want to look at that again.
Yeah, yeah.
Unconventional, but could be super effective.
If you have a hard nut to crack, mate, maybe that's a technique that you can roll out for someone.
Yeah.
That's like a
Yeah.
crash test dummy. There you
Right.
go. Give me 6 hours. It's
Right.
like give me 30 push-ups. Give me 6 hours of watching porn.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? I mean, the podcast is about this concept of coming back and returning to self and overcoming the trials and tribulations that we all face and experience on our hero's journey. You've clearly reclaimed parts of you and aspects of you, acknowledging that, like all of us, I imagine that you're a work in progress. How do you maintain the path? Are there moments when you find that you're not aligned or that you've fallen out of alignment with your values or the man that you're trying to be? And when you feel that way, how do you address that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely those moments, as people have said, falling off the horse and then getting back on the horse. As I've worked more on myself, connected more within to that authenticity, to that authentic self, spirit, divinity, whatever you want to call it, those instances of falling off become less interesting and also less frequent. So for anybody who's watching who might be wondering, does this just mean like, yeah, I just constantly need to get back on the horse? In a way, yeah. In those moments when you fall off, you can always get back on. And things will shift. It won't be as often as it has been. Just like most of you probably aren't pooping your pants like you were when you were an infant. How did that happen? Well, you grew up, you matured, you learned how to control your bowels. Right? That's not a concern for too many people watching. So just like you can improve there, you can here as well. And a lot of it doesn't even have to be a conscious effort after a certain point. It just becomes who you are. It's a natural expression of who you are. Like for the disciplined monk, meditation just becomes a part of like, yeah, this is just what I do. I love to do this. It's an important part of practice. How to get back on the horse. That one, I think, once you get clear view and understanding of what your values are, those core values, and it becomes ingrained into your unconscious. Anytime you do fall off the horse, it'll just become a natural reflex of, yeah, wasn't great use of my time, not worth doing that again. Let's go back to what we're really about.
Yeah. I was thinking as you were talking just then, the thing that came to my head was that principle is very much associated with meditation. Just start again, the next breath. Mm-hmm. And I think you're 100% right. You just keep on going.
Yeah.
Right.
And something that just popped up is like when you talked about when we were talking about the pornography piece, and I know there are probably plenty of men who will have the concern, well, if I relapse, like it was all meant for nothing. I get so down about myself and beat myself up. I think that's the consequence when the only approach is have an accountability partner and the focus is don't ever look at it again. With meditation, with, I imagine even with plant medicine ceremonies, I don't think you've ever heard the prompt for a plant ceremony. Just stay calm. Don't get triggered at all. Like if you've done this right, you won't get bothered at all. It's almost like the idea is you will have shit come up, but it's how you work with and through it that changes. Like one of the most powerful changes I think a person can make is when they shift the way they respond to things that used to bother them. Just like the example I gave with my mom. It wasn't about getting her to change. It was about that change within me. So she could criticize all she wants, but it doesn't knock me over in the same way anymore. And so with a porn addiction thing. The focus isn't you've completely eliminated porn out of your life. It's about, well, there was some sort of need it was fulfilling, right? What's the core value of that need? Get clear on that value, and then, envision, how can you meet that need in your life? What are the things that do bring you that joy, excitement, that fully align with that value? And then porn just becomes it's like dust on, the windowsill. You're like, oh, there's some dust, wipe it away. And even if a person does relapse, it's not a big deal. It's not oh my gosh, this means I'm now an awful person again.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Man, one of the things that I love about you is that you've got this way of communicating where you've got compassion. There's compassion in your message and in your energy. And I just want to kind of honor you for that, because I think there are a lot of men's coaches out there that have got more of a, it's all almost militant in terms of the approach. It's kind of like suck it up, and I think that there needs to be room for compassion, because we're in the arena of vulnerability here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you purport to want to work with and heal and impact people, then I think by definition, there's got to be a degree of compassion and vulnerability that's sprinkled over the top of the message. And I just, I think that you do a terrific job of that. Man, I wanna kind of bring us onto the home straight. What I got a couple more questions for you. What do you think being of service can bring to men?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think being of service can bring men a sense of connection, joy, sense of purpose and love. I think every man at his core gets a deep amount of joy and a sense of peace when he sees that he has something to offer and that other people around him are benefiting. I liken it to just like a fire. There's something very poignant to me about the image of a fire that just keeps the village warm at night. And it's not like a wildly raging fire. I think some men can, especially in self-development, get very gung-ho about you kill it every day. You give 1,010% and, go big or go home. There's a time and place for that, but it often isn't a sustainable fire. Like it's a big blazing inferno, but after that, it's gone. And I think being of service for men who are of service and burn long and slow, like that consistent burning fire, the charcoal that's still very hot and slow burning, there's a sense of warmth. There's a sense of light that you provide, and you provide illumination for people, a sense of comfort. And I think about some of the moments that men are drawn to in their own personal lives, things that inspire them when they watch it in movies, film. I think so many men have kind of choked up when they see scenes of like a man giving his life up. Not to say the highest honor for a man is to die for people, but there is a sense of, I gave my life in service to something bigger than myself. And when we see other men do that, like I get teary-eyed and choke up every time I see Boromir die in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
He takes 3 arrows to the chest as he's defending Merry and Pippin. And it's like, I don't want to get shot by arrows to die, but wow, do I respect the heart of this man of just giving himself to something bigger.
Yeah.
And some of the moments that I've heard men get such satisfaction from, like waking up early before everyone else to have a cup of coffee, or shoveling snow when everybody's still asleep. There's kind of this strange attraction that men are drawn to, like the sense of being nothing, being in the void, but we're doing something that's meaningful. Like I remember once I saw a man, I think the term is a seamster or something. He's just in his little store. It was late at night, and he's on his sewing machine. And that was just so poignant to me. Like, I just couldn't stop staring at that guy. I'm like, this is a guy who's alone in his store, and he's still sewing on a sewing machine. Like, some of the intention and discipline, even the mundane, boring aspect of it, but he's there. And I just felt such affection and respect for that.
I love that answer, man. That's a beautiful answer. I'm looking forward to watching this again so I can hear you repeat that answer. That was beautiful. What touched me was you used the word illumination in relation to service, and I think, yeah, that really landed. Man, last question. I understand that you're a martial artist. How important is it for us men to be working the body, to be grinding?
I think it's very valuable. I can't remember I think it was a Greek philosopher or some Stoic who said, it's a travesty if no man knows the pleasure of mastering his own body. I think that's very true. And whether it be martial arts, going to the gym, some aspect of physical stress, mastery, doing something over and over and over, so you are very much in your body, and learning how it absolutely can be a weapon, but also knowing control, knowing, as Jordan Peterson said about some Bible verse, like knowing when to sheathe the sword, knowing when to draw the sword. The idea is you have the capacity to be dangerous when need be, but you also know how to be gentle. And so I think he's famous now for be a warrior in a garden, not a gardener in a war mentality.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love that.
I think that's why women are also attracted to the whole daddy archetype and those father bears. Is that he's tough, he's grizzly if he's grizzly, but there's a sense of he's very protective. If something goes down, you're going to see a side of him that's dangerous, and he's also so deeply loving and gentle. And I think that is a place for men to come more into connection with that piece around power we talked about. Because I think when you haven't had a sense of mastery over your body, where you feel strong and good in your body, it doesn't cause a sense of high self-esteem. And when there isn't that sense of, I feel good, I feel strong within myself, that's where some of the shadows can slip in, where you try to find power in other ways, and those other ways come out sideways.
Yeah, beautiful. Roy, how do people get in touch with you? Someone's watching this, they think, holy shit, I need to speak to this guy. How do they get in touch with you, and what sort of services? How can you help them?
Yeah, so they can contact me through Instagram, Sacred Wild Man, or contact me through my website, sacredwildman.com. There's a contact form that they can send. And what I have available is, right now I'm working with people, men mainly, but also women, one-on-one. So I take people through a 90-day one-on-one coaching program. And in the future, I'm also looking to put together some groups or memberships so that it's more accessible to people who feel like working one-on-one is, for the time being, not something that's feasible for them.
Yeah, wonderful. Roy, you've been so generous with me. I know it's late where you are, man, so I really appreciate your time. And I just want to, again, just honor and appreciate the role that you play. The image I've got of you is that, each man is on their own hero's journey, and woman, by the way. And you're kind of you're a guy on the path holding a lantern, saying, "This is the way. Follow me." And I think it wasn't until that I started to go through my own stuff that I started to appreciate what a coach could do. Because I think previous versions of me would have disparaged that and thought, coach, a men's coach, what for? Like, I have come full. There aren't many things that I've come full circle on in terms of believing one thing and then completely changing my mind. But I think coaching is one of those things where I've completely changed my mind. I think we spend our money on such shit and buy all these baubles and trinkets, when what we could be doing is tapping into the collective wisdom that's out there to help us stay on the path, remain aligned. So for all the great work that you do, and for the genuineness that you exhibit in terms of your wisdom and your advice, and leading from the front, being vulnerable and open yourself, man, I fucking love that. And people like you are walking permission slips. And so, I just wish you all the success. Before we go, Sacred Wild Man, where did that come from?
Yeah, that was, and thank you for those kind words. Once again, it's been an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for having me. And I think your podcast and the topic, The Greatest Comeback, which I love, I think will be similarly a guiding light, a torch for men to access, to listen to. Just on a drive to work, they could hear this and be like, that was what I needed, this podcast that we created. It's the best part of my drive when I go to work. So I love the vision and intention you have. Sacred Wild Man was born through a retreat that I was part of with the Mankind Project. So it's an international organization that has men's groups and men's retreats. And this men's retreat was called the New Warrior Training. And it was after that retreat that I started to kind of just like draw a little, sigil or emblem, like, what's the thing that I want for my business? And I think if you saw my page before, it didn't have my picture. It just had the kind of sort of the Maori warrior haka type tattooed face.
Yeah, I remember
So I had drawn that. And then as I was coming up with a name, like, all right, what should I name my website? I was playing around with The Wild Man, because that has stuck with me from the book Iron John by Robert Bly. Are you familiar with that book?
Yeah.
Okay. So The Wild Man, was super potent underneath layers of grief and forgotten. And so when I read that story, I was like, wow, this wild man is the one who's been knocking on my doors. The repressed aggression, that's what was needing my attention. So absolutely, this wild man is important. I'm not going to disparage him and say, oh, this is primal and primitive and uncivilized. No, back to your question, have men lost power? I think becoming too civilized in a way has caused that as well. And so Iron John was here to say, or the wild man was here to say, no, you can't forget me. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm an integral part of you. And then to honor him, I'm like, well, he's not just a savage. There's a deep wisdom to him. So sacred, this wild man is sacred. So Sacred Wild Man came together in honor of this primal life force that can seem scary for a lot of men, but is also an important part of who they are. And when they can integrate that aspect of themselves without marking it as bad, wrong, or evil, connected to the heart, deeply powerful.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I just encourage any man that is going through stuff or trying to figure out who he is and how he wants to walk in the world, to reach out to you, because I think you're a keeper of wisdom, and there's a lot you can offer. Roy Wang, the Sacred Wildman, thank you very much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you, Luke. It's been a pleasure.